Morning, everybody. Being here. Those of you I see in the Zendo, those of you online, and anyone who may hear this recording. Woo! I've got an air vent right here that seems to want to blow my talk around. So let me get reorganized here. So today's talk is inspired by an email that Peg sent all of us on April the 2nd. And her letter is about practicing the Buddha way during these troubled times. And I hope you had a chance to read it. In her email, Peg writes to us about these times being a perfect training ground for our Zen practice. As we train in the practices, we are also offering the fruit of the practice to this world we live in. For today's talk, I'm going to expand on one small section from Peg's email. She talks about the perfections being a practice for these times. She writes, "We can train in the 6 practices of perfection, the Paramitas of generosity, morality, patience, vigor, concentration, and wisdom. From this mind, we can then discover the most appropriate and meaningful action for the path of vow." So today's talk will explore how we might train in and offer the Paramitas at this particular historic moment. The Paramitas, or the perfections, guide the lives of bodhisattvas. As bodhisattvas, we aspire to relieve the suffering of all beings, to offer support for the well-being and liberation of all. And as you know, we face similar circumstances of fear and suffering following the 2016 election. At that time, there were a lot of folks, including me, talking about leaving the country. Several of us met with Peg about our distress, and from that meeting, Buddhist Action Now was born. It is a group open to anyone who wants to use a Buddhist perspective as we face challenges of these times. And they still meet every Saturday. The most important thing I remember from that meeting, besides the formation of Buddhist Action Now, was something Peg said. She said, "Bodhisattvas were made for these times." And hearing that changed everything. I took a step back from my own fear and hatred and took a step towards living by vow. And I think that was that happened for everyone who heard her say that. It was a real changing moment. So, bodhisattvas were made for these times. Makes perfect sense. The Buddha's enlightenment revealed how intimately connected everything is. Our aspiration to live by vow and the circumstances of this world arose together. We are not separate from the circumstances of our lives. Also, we are mistaken if we imagine our ancestors always lived by vow in peaceful times. Mostly they didn't. There were a lot of wars and battles during the Buddha's time, and Dogen lived in a time of wars and violence even among monks. So we are not living by vow in a time that is an anomaly. In a way, you could say we were born for this particular time. And the Paramitas show us the way. The Paramitas are compassion in action. One thing to remember is that we are training in the Paramitas. Mistakes will be made. They are not called the perfections in the sense of perfectionism. The term perfect refers to the absolute practice of Paramitas. This is when we practice the Paramitas without a focus on self and other. We simply offer what is needed without being self-referential. Relative practice of the paramitas is when we offer compassion in a conventional way. We are aware of self and other. I give you this. Both kinds of practices are good training. The paramitas are perfected as we practice. Reb Anderson, in his book, Entering the Mind of Buddha, says the 6 paramitas, the perfections, are heroic practices of bodhisattvas, and they are a training in appropriate response. Isn't that what we're looking for during these times of fear and suffering? An appropriate response. We don't want to continue in stunned silence, nor do we want to react in a way that might make matters worse. The paramitas guide our appropriate response. They are deep and boundless. To discover this boundlessness, we practice the paramitas as an ever-deepening training. The paramitas are based on the bodhisattva vow to benefit and liberate all beings. Although they are usually presented as a list, they actually overlap and swirl around and through each other. Each paramita supports and is supported by the other paramitas. It's actually difficult to discuss any one paramita without referencing at least another paramita. This talk is an exploration of each paramita and how it is applicable to these challenging times. It is also about how these times are the perfect training ground for living by vow. Of course, it comes from my limited point of view, and I hope it encourages your own exploration of the paramitas and how we might offer them to ourselves and others. Today, we start by exploring generosity, and this is a good place to start because every single paramita is a form of generosity. Reb Anderson describes generosity like this. Giving is the heart of, let me start over again with that. Giving is the heart of bodhisattva practice. Generosity attends and responds with kindness to whatever turns up, including people and events we find challenging. It graciously receives all aspects of our life. It takes a lot of training to practice kindness towards whatever comes up. It isn't easy to respond from kindness when we see harm is being done to others and to ourselves. The harm we see happening all around us is caused by fear, hatred, and delusion, and our first reaction is often to respond from our own fear, hatred, and delusion. This just creates more of the same. Sometimes an appropriate response might be a resounding, no, stop. But the underlying source of that statement makes a difference. Does it come from primarily from kindness, a sense of care, or from fear and aversion? The kindest thing one might say to a perpetrator is no, stop. But if that statement arises from your own fear and hatred, it can just perpetuate the problem. If our motivation is care for all concerned, there is a lot more power to those words. Developing the kindness that is at the basis of generosity requires extensive training, especially when we are practicing in the midst of the pervasive suffering we see in our world today. In her letter, Peg recommends metta practices for developing loving kindness for ourselves and others, without exception. These practices deserve a whole talk all their own, and in fact, my next Dharma talk will be on metta practice in these times. But briefly, there are 2 metta practices we commonly use at Appamada to develop our own natural compassion. Radiating the Brahma Viharas is one of those practices, and offering loving kindness phrases is another. We always offer metta to ourselves first. We must care for ourselves to be able to offer care to others. and this is especially important in these times. Generosity, like all the Paramitas, is perfected with training. In the beginning, we may approach generosity with a dualistic perspective. We see the giver and the receiver as separate. This kind of giving is good. If you give a blanket to somebody who is cold, some suffering has been relieved. And in our relative world of duality, there is a giver and a recipient. But as we train, we begin to see that we are deeply connected to everything and everybody. Sometimes generosity arises egoless and spontaneous. The line between giver and receiver becomes quite blurred. The act of giving happens within a context of being deeply connected to all that is. It is this sense of connection that is the perfection of generosity and the perfection of all the Paramitas. So, how to train in the practice of generosity in these times? There are three aspects of giving: the gift of material things, the gift of fearlessness, and the gift of Dharma. First, the gift of material things. In these times of so much suffering, there are plenty of folks in need of material gifts. You might consider offering your time or a monthly donation to a reputable organization that has the infrastructure in place to help relieve suffering. The next generosity is a gift of fearlessness. Simply by practicing the Paramitas in our daily lives, we become a less fearful presence in the lives of others. The Heart Sutra says that as we practice, fear is no longer a hindrance. When we feel fearful, it may be a warning that some action is needed. I think the fearlessness the Buddha is talking about is not allowing fear to hinder appropriate action. I think offering the gift of fearlessness begins with becoming more and more fearless in our own lives. When people see a degree of fearlessness in us, it may give them hope for themselves. Fearlessness gradually develops in our own lives as we practice, as we sit zazen, and as we practice the Buddha's teachings in our daily lives. We rely on Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. We are not alone. The joy of practice itself develops fearlessness. Our own fearlessness can be contagious. When we speak to others respectfully, even those with whom we disagree, we offer the gift of fearlessness. In these times, there are people we fear and people who fear us. The more we can realize our shared humanity, the better. Any chance you have to connect with folks of differing perspectives, the better. For example, Betty, the secretary at my CPA's office, and I have become quite friendly. And over time, it's become clear that we have political differences. But nonetheless, we authentically enjoy each other. And anytime I find a reason to call the CPA's office, we really enjoy chatting. So some degree of fearlessness has been eliminated from the world, just simply in that little relationship. And that's something we can all do. And this brings us to the third form of generosity, the gift of Dharma. And this does not necessarily mean teaching the Dharma in a formal way. Many of those who suffer in these times have no interest in Zen. Still, every moment we live by vow is a teaching moment. Reb Anderson describes it like this: when Buddhas talk, when Buddhas walk, when Buddhas eat rice and drink tea, all this is a gift of Dharma. Bodhisattvas aspire to offer all their actions of body, speech, and mind as Dharma gifts. We have received the gifts of Dharma, and now we have the opportunity to give it to others. Every moment offers an opportunity to be a living example of the Dharma we have received. To live by vow in this way takes practice, practice, practice. The times we live in are training ground for practicing the Buddha way. The next perfection is the paramita of morality, also called the paramita of ethics. This paramita contains the precepts we receive when we receive bodhisattva vows. Living by these precepts is an act of generosity. When we do our best to live by the precepts, we are also offering fearlessness to all we encounter. Folks don't need to be afraid of us. The three pure precepts are to do no evil, to do good, and to free all beings from suffering. Living our life in this way can only benefit these times we live in. The 10 major precepts are refraining from killing, refraining from stealing, not misusing sexuality, refraining from lying, not misusing intoxicants or encouraging others to do so, not slandering, not praising oneself at the expense of others, not being possessive, not harboring ill will, and not disparaging the three treasures. Some of these precepts stand out to me as particularly pertinent to the times we live in. Refraining from lying and refraining from slandering are two of them. In these days of plenty of misinformation, it is important to be sure of our facts before we speak. I think one of the most important precepts for these times is refraining from harboring ill will. This precept is not encouraging spiritual bypassing. Pretending to yourself and to others that you are too spiritual to be disturbed by the events of the day might be a definition of spiritual bypassing. But most of us are acutely aware of the harm being done to ourselves and others. If it is within our power to diminish harm, we do it. In some cases, that might be an immediate and personal action. Let's say it is within our power to assist a refugee or a young woman in dire straits who just cannot become a mother right now. You do what you can. But many of us are rarely in a position to offer that kind of help. We can ask for the support of our representatives and support the organizations that are in a position to help. What doesn't help yourself or others is to harbor ill will. This is one of the hardest precepts for me during these times. That may be for you also. I've been shocked and regretful of some of the very non-Buddhist thoughts that have passed through my mind in the past few months. The important thing is to acknowledge ill will and return to the vow that is even stronger than hatred. That is the vow to relieve all suffering. So, as I said, this is not spiritual bypassing. It is repentance of all our ancient twisted karma and living as our truest self. When we live by the precepts, this is what we can offer our world. When the precepts are perfected, the world begins to stop feeling like an us versus them situation. The next paramita is patience. Patience is the gift we can offer to ourselves and others as we face life as it is. Like all the paramitas, it requires training, and the times we live in are a rigorous training ground for patience. It is painful to see the extensive suffering of the world we live in. Reb Anderson puts it this way: a ring of fire surrounds every Buddha's meditation seat. Buddhas sit at the center of the suffering of all beings, and they have developed the capacity to be open to boundless suffering. This capacity is the perfection of patience. Reb Anderson's description seems to exactly describe what it feels like to live in these times. It does feel like we sit in the center of a fiery ring of suffering. This training in the Buddha way can feel fiery and hot. It can feel overwhelming. We just want to run away. Our training is to hold a steady seat in the presence of suffering. Fortunately, we are not alone as we train in patience. We are supported by the three treasures, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. It is my belief and experience that all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas have our back. We have the Dharma teachings to guide our way, and very importantly, we have the support of Sangha. We support each other. In these trying times, it is so important to be compassionate and patient with ourselves as we train in the Paramitas. Give yourself what you need. Take a walk and enjoy the sights and sounds of this incredible world. Enjoy the love and companionship of friends and family. Take the opportunity to laugh together whenever possible, or even laugh out loud by yourself. You need these things to be patient with your own suffering and the suffering of others. This quote is from Song of the Jewel Mirror Samadhi. Turning away and touching are both wrong, for it is a massive fire. I think each of us, for ourselves, has to discover what is turning away and what is touching the great fire of suffering. For me, turning away is the delusion that suffering can be ignored. For me, touching that great fire means getting burned up in it myself to the point I am so focused on my own pain that I am no longer a resource for anybody. To relieve the suffering of this world, we each need to find our own unique way. Our training in patience is discovering for ourselves how to be upright and present with all we experience, with our own suffering and the suffering of others. We have Zazen and the Buddha's words to guide us. This world we currently live in offers us advanced training in patience. The next paramita is vigor or effort. Reb Anderson calls it joyful effort, and I like that. Joyful effort is important support to the three previous paramitas, generosity, ethics, and patience, and essential to the final two, concentration and wisdom. So how do we keep effort joyful? Reb Anderson offers us some suggestions. It begins with aspiration, which arises with bodhicitta, the mind of awakening. Bodhicitta is not something that can be forced. It is something that is discovered as we sit zazen and practice Buddha Dharma in our lives. Reb Anderson describes it like this. This aspiration is the deep and vast intention to become a Buddha for the welfare and liberation of all beings. The mountains, rivers, and great earth. Our spiritual energy is based on this aspiration for the peace and freedom of all beings. As we nurture this aspiration, it very naturally becomes a commitment. We may ask our teacher if we may receive the precepts in the Bodhisattva vow. Committing to this aspiration and vow is very much relational to everyone and everything. And within that relationality, we come to know that the giver, the gift, and the receiver are inseparable. When we feel our joyful effort lagging, we receive energy simply by remembering our vow, as well as the three treasures that are our constant support. Consistent and steady zazen practice also support our joyful energy. Joyful effort thrives on the energy of zazen. One thing I've learned over the years is that when my enthusiasm is flagging, the most important thing not to drop is Zazen. Something else Reb Anderson mentions to support joyful effort is rest and rejection. He advises not to take on a practice you are not ready for. In fact, I hope you will only adopt the parts of this talk that you are ready for and at least temporarily reject any other part of it. My own practice life has been a consistent process of hearing and remembering something I wasn't ready for, only to return to it years later. Rest is supremely important to maintaining joyful effort. As I mentioned before, it is so important to have compassion for ourselves. These times need each and every bodhisattva, so please take very good care of yourselves. The paramita of effort supports us as we come together to offer our presence and our care to this world. The next paramita is the perfection of concentration. It is sometimes referred to as perfection of meditation. The previous paramitas support our Zazen practice. We are generous and patient with ourselves when our minds wander. Generosity allows us to sit for and with others. Joyful effort supports our consistent Zazen practice. Zazen supports the joyful effort necessary for all of the paramitas. It is the beating heart of the paramitas. As we sit, we very naturally begin to see that separation of self and other is only relatively true. We begin to live in the flowing co-arising of all things. In this way, Zazen supports the perfection of all the paramitas. The final paramita is the perfection of wisdom. This perfection is intrinsic to each paramita. Each paramita is a gift of compassion we offer to ourselves and all other beings. As we train in offering these gifts, the line between giver, gift, and receiver becomes quite blurred. We simply give of ourselves because that's what we do. That is the perfection of wisdom at work. Every morning we are reminded of our work in the world when we chant Hymn to the Perfection of Wisdom. Homage to the perfection of wisdom, the lovely, the holy. The perfection of wisdom gives light. Unstained, the entire world cannot stain her. She is a source of light, and from everyone in the triple world, she removes darkness. All of a sudden, that one really got to me. I heard it. So thank you for training in the paramitas. Thanks for offering the paramitas to all who suffer, and that is everyone, including ourselves. And that also includes those who are harmed and those who cause harm. Please don't hesitate to stand up for your values, but do so from a heart that respects the ultimate worth of every being. Please take good care of yourselves. As I said, your presence in this world, in this time and place, is extremely important. So, this has been a whirlwind tour of the paramitas. But to begin integrating the paramitas into your life, you may wish to take the course, Becoming an Oasis in a World on Fire, weaving the paramitas into the tapestry of our lives. Teachers from Appamada and all our sister sanghas will begin offering this course monthly for 8 months, starting June 21st to January 3rd. And I highly recommend taking a deep dive into the paramitas. So thank you very much for your attention. And do we have time for questions or not, guys?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Any questions or comments? How do you use the, how do you, I know many of you practice the paramitas in your life. I'd love to hear how you practice them, especially in these times, these difficult times. And I'm not sure I can see everybody. Maybe if I go to a different screen, I can. Let's see. No, I might need help seeing raised hands.
I'll try to help.
Okay, thank you, Marla.
Online people, if you want to raise your hand, please use the reactions button at the bottom.
I see Anne.
Good morning. Yeah, I thought it was really interesting when you were quoting from Rev Anderson about generosity, that one of the phrases he used was about receiving as being
Ah,
generosity.
yeah.
And I thought that was really interesting. It led me back in my head to living and being lived for the benefit of all beings. Being willing to receive is part of generosity.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, Anne. Uh, as I read his book, which is, by the way, a great book, anyone who hasn't read it, yeah, I noticed that too. I just could only fit so much into this already pretty long Dharma talk, so I'm really glad you mentioned that. Thank you. If there are no more questions, we can move
Kim
on.
has got his hand up.
Oh, somebody has a hand up? Okay.
Um, so my first teacher sent something out the other day about our state of mind and how important that is. And I keep coming back to that. It was something I really didn't think of. In fact, Dalai Lama initiated some studies of meditators. And the big deal in the studies were what happens to seasoned meditators when they face something difficult, and they do a spike, but they do about half the spike that the rest of us do. So they just go up a little, other people go up a whole thing. But I've been focusing all week on this other part of it, which is how are we when we're not facing difficulty and trying to get lower in that response. So, I always thought that, well, like the perfections are tools that we use,
Yeah.
but how are we when we aren't using the tools? Because
Well, we can always use that tool. We don't need to be in dire straits to use them. Every day of our life is an opportunity. Kim, don't you think?
yes, but they're not things we adopt as we need, which is what you're saying too. And that's what's so beautiful about Zazen, and especially Zazen when we're not triggered,
Yeah,
just getting low,
very pleasant, yes.
so that we're ready.
Yeah, and what you're talking about makes me think about meta practice and equanimity as one of the Brahma Viharas. And yeah, I think what this all is about finding some kind of balance and not responding, not being reactive in our response, but responding from a place that's just very present with what is and offers what is needed. I don't know. Is that are we sort of on the talking about the same thing here?
a way. So I'm thinking about a tree, and we talk about, well, a tree's so good when there's a fire or when there's a drought, or, but how's the tree just on a regular, normal day? That's kind of where nothing's happening. How can we be like that so that we're ready? But
How are you, Kim, how are you on a regular, normal day? That's what I want to know.
I haven't had one yet. So I had two dogs who are just so good at patiently, like, being ready, but being so passive and quiet and relaxed, it appeared at least.
Okay.
And they were ready for anything. And that's kind of the state that I'm looking at. The
Oh,
state
now I get it. Yeah.
happens. Okay.
Yeah, you're sort of like talking about what's the story about the frog that's always ready? It's so quiet and still, but always ready. Is that what you're pointing
Yeah.
to?
Some people can just be exhausted waiting for the next thing to happen.
Like wanting drama? Kim, you and I are getting too much into it. We'll have to talk about this some more later.
There's a word anticipatory, and it's a state of like anxiety, even though not anticipatory.
That things might go wrong?
Yeah, yes, like a nervous state. And the contrast to that would be the state of equanimity.
Right. Well, thank you for all of that, Kim. It's certainly something to think about. I'm not sure I understand everything that you said, but you and I talk frequently, so next Thursday we'll hash it out, okay?
Okay, thank you.
I think I saw a hand, Rosemary.
Yeah, hi Ellen, thank you so much. This was all of that you said was such great reminders for how to be in this time and how to use our practice. And I had something to share, but now I want to respond to Kim because I was taking a walk today and I did a really brisk walk like to the center of town. And I thought I started to do the same thing going back, but I was getting this knot in my stomach. I go, well, that's not good. So I just stopped. And I just stood still in front of this house for like 60 seconds, looking around. And then I looked up and saw this bird that was like the tree was full of leaves, but there was one branch at the very, very top, and there was this robin singing, and it was just lovely, and the pain went away. So the reason we bring this up with what Kim was talking about, I think it has to do with our close attention to our nervous systems. And when we are, I think that we can stop and do a little resting and concentration and just being, and it might resolve what you were talking about, Kim, that anticipatory anxiety, which is probably going on all the time at different levels. So anyway, I wanted to present that. But the thing it was all beautiful. I took a lot of notes, Ellen, but rest and reject, that was very, very helpful, which is in the realm of self-care and starting with taking care of yourself first. And it fits with patience also, because this is such a rich practice. We can really fall in love with all the different aspects, and we may not be ready for them.
That's right.
I love that. Thank you so much for all of it.
Thank you, Rosemary. I believe we're out of time. Am I correct? Oh, except I see Darcy. Let's let Darcy go.
So do we go till 11 or 11:20?
I don't know.
I don't either. Anyway, I wanted to thank you, Ellen. It was really lovely. It's always lovely to contemplate the Paramitas. And also, I wanted to share uh, with you, because you also said that really you can't really think about one without them all being interwoven. And yeah, and so I wanted to share this morning. So I go out on the porch, as I have been doing sometimes these lovely mornings, to sit. Well, my husband likes to sit on the porch too, you know. So he's out there on the porch swing. I go sit down and he's chatting a little bit. And you know, it's become not that difficult for me to just tell him, you know, that I want quiet now. But the way that it came about this morning made me think of something you said. I said, you know, oh, so I turned to him and I said, you know, I think I'm just going to take in the morning now and gather myself for the day, you know. And you were talking about meditation and concentration. That term concentration's always been a little difficult for me because I've associated it with, you know, really kind of keying in on and focusing. But it was that plus what you said kind of came together. It's like gathering myself together for the day. That's what sitting is. And it's a way of taking in with your body all of the paramitas at once, you know.
Nice.
I just thought I'd share that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for this, by the way. It's a
Thank you.
beautiful way to introduce this upcoming study period.
Yeah, it's sort of a little intro to the upcoming course.
Yeah.
In offering incense, observing silence, and studying the Paramitas, we extend compassionate care to and all those who are gravely ill, lacking basic necessities, or suffering violence in the world in thought, word, or deed. May they be serene through their suffering, and may they, together with all beings, realize the awakened way. Caught in the self-centered dream, only suffering, holding to self-centered thoughts, exactly the dream. Each moment, life as it is, the only teacher, being just this moment, compassion's way. Caught in the self-centered dream, only suffering, holding to self-centered thoughts, exactly the dream. Each moment, life as it is, the only teacher, being just this moment, compassion's way. Caught in the self-centered dream, only suffering, holding to self-centered thoughts, exactly the dream. Each moment, life as it is, the only teacher, being just this moment, compassion's way. Let us be respectfully reminded, life and death are of supreme importance. Time swiftly passes by, and with it our only chance. Each of us strive to awaken. Be aware, do not squander our life.